Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade, the most important and fantastically wonderful, amazing project I'm trying to do on this channel. Get through all of the Haydn symphonies, and then maybe we'll do string quartets and piano sonatas and trios and God knows what else. But first, all of the Haydn symphonies with discussions, musical examples, analyses, and everything to try and convince you that Haydn is just the most amazing composer that you've ever heard. Well, one of them, I always say comparisons are invidious. There's no reason we need to make comparisons. It's just Haydn for himself. The guy was unbelievable. And Symphony No. 52, which is what we're up to, is in C minor. It's one of the very greatest of the Sturm und Drang symphonies, the storm and stress period, where he wrote a series of tense, exciting, emotionally anguished pieces in largely minor keys. And one of the fascinating things about number 52 particularly is that it doesn't have a nickname. The real famous ones always have nicknames because that's the only way people remember them. But 52 is one of the very greatest, if not the greatest, of all of the Sturm und Drang symphonies, and it has no nickname. It's just Symphony No. 52, but it's in C minor, the same key that Beethoven exploited in his Fifth Symphony, and which we really kind of associate with pieces that are dark and turbulent and exciting in that way. Now, I have a very specific task in this particular chat, because what I would really like to do, because I can do it really well with this symphony, is explain to you how Haydn creates symphonic wholes. We talk about wholes as in W-H-O-L-E-S, not H-O-L-E-S, not like things you fall into. Wholes as in completeness. Why this is a single work in 4 movements that all relate to each other, and do it in the most wonderful way, and how the fact that they relate to each other is what makes this symphony so expressively powerful. And it's tremendously powerful. Now, most of the time, when people talk about the Sturm und Drang period and works in minor keys, that's what they talk about, works in minor keys. What makes something tense, anguished, unhappy, tragic, whatever you want to say, any of the darker emotions, it's the fact that it's rooted in a minor key. I use minor keys for reasons that the psychologists can tell us are more unstable, disruptive, and for that reason, they sound to us anxious and sometimes sad or pathetic. You can come up with your own adjectives, like I said. But here's the point. What makes these minor keys powerful is the fact that they're contrasted with the potential for happiness. It's the depth of the intensity and depth of the sad emotion, the negative emotion, has to exist in contrast with something. And Haydn knew that better than anybody in the universe. He knew it, and he knew how to do it. So the obvious thing about especially the first movement and the last movement is that you're going to have themes which are in minor key to begin with, and subsidiary themes, or second subjects, as they're often called, which are in happier major keys, which, when the music is recapitulated, when it's repeated at the end of each movement, will be repeated wholly in the minor key. And that turn from major to minor gives an extra zotz to the sad bits, to the tragic bits. And everybody knows this. This is not news. This is not rocket science. And for that reason, I'm not even going to play that part of the symphony, of each movement, the first movement finale, because you can go listen to it yourself. And I urge you to do it. But what I want to explain is how everything works together, because every single movement in this symphony shares something. And the way Haydn deals with what they share also contributes to the power and force of the expressive meaning of the music. And it does it in a way which is, I think, just as intense and even more fabulous than the rather obvious idea of simply playing everything in a minor key during the recapitulation of the first movement and finale. So because there's more to just that switch. The switch from major to minor has to sound inevitable. It has to sound like something that's been prepared. However shocking or surprising it has to be, there's a logic behind it. And that logic is what makes the piece so gripping. And so I want to talk about the logic, because Haydn's symphonic logic is unassailably fabulous. And as soon as you understand what it is, I absolutely guarantee you're going to just go, aha, it's amazing. Because Haydn's not trying to hide anything. There's nothing difficult or tricky about it. He wants us, as I've said a million times, he wants us to hear it. And the more we listen to it, the more we'll hear it, the more we'll know. So the essence of this symphony comes down to 3 musical elements. And these elements are not themes at all. They are musical objects which appear in all of the movements, which have otherwise original themes. They don't share tunes or quote from each other in any way other than these small, tiny elements. And they are you ready? A groan, a moan, and a squiggle. Those are the only things you have to know. There is a groan, a moan, and a 5-note squiggle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-dum. Just like that. Wada-wada-wum. That's the whole deal. And out of these tiny elements, Haydn is going to create one of the most emotionally gripping symphonies of the entire 18th century. So let's start off with some examples. We have really a marvelous performance of this symphony. Let me see who's doing it. I don't even remember who's doing it. It's on Naxos. It's one of the people in the Naxos series. And let's see, CD10, who cares? We'll get to it when we get to it. But it's the Naxos series. I'm going to play you the groan. The groan first. And then I'm going to talk to you about where you find the groan and the moan. He doesn't introduce the groan, the moan, and the squiggle all at once. They come in successively, and the squiggle doesn't show up until the second movement. So I'm going to play you the groan, the moan, and then the entire first movement exposition, so you can hear how they fit into the overall trajectory of the work. So here we go. Here is the groan. That's it. Dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, and the groan. Dum. You can hear it because Haydn reserves special odd harmony for the groan. A moment where it just comes out of out of nowhere. You just hear this. Yes. And when Haydn does something like that in a movement, you know it's going to be important later, either in the movement or in some other part of the symphony or something, but because he wants you to recognize it right away. Next, we hear the moan. Now, the moan is very, very delicate, but here is the moan. The moan has the quality of undermining the tune. Whenever you hear it, it becomes somewhat distracted and distressed. This particular moan is not as dark as it later becomes. Now, where do you hear the groan and the moan? The squiggle, like I said, we'll hear in the next movement. But the groan and the moan occur in the second subject of the first movement. And that's what's so fascinating about this. You know, Haydn usually is very economical in his use of thematic material. Some of his movements are what they call monothematic. In other words, everything is based on the initial idea or elements of it, which start developing right away. But in this particular symphony, you hear the second subject twice, complete, which is kind of amazing. It's da-da-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum. That's the second subject, da-da-da-da-dum. It goes on like that. But the point is, each time it gets interrupted. The first time it gets interrupted by the groan, and the second time it gets interrupted by the moan. It sort of evaporates into little moans and trickles off. So what does this do? The important thing to keep in mind is that not only is this major key, rather warm and friendly second subject, going to be played in the minor key in the recapitulation, but it's undermined from the start. From the very start, it's unstable, even though it's not in itself something that sounds sad or otherwise, troubling. And that is one of the things, one of the techniques that makes this symphony so marvelous in its expression of passion and anxiety and turbulence. It's not that it's all going to sit in a minor key. It's that the major key, the supposedly happy bits, are constantly being questioned and undermined by these recurring elements. And these recurring elements will take on a darker quality as the symphony progresses. And you're going to hear that. So now let's listen to the entire exposition of the first movement of Symphony Number 52. The opening idea is grim, really grim, and you hear that twice as well. So you don't have to worry about that kind of anxiety right from the start. It grabs you like this. But the interesting thing in the symphony is the progression from the contrast between sad and happy to sad and sadder and darker as the happy bits are slowly pulled over to the dark side. So here it is, the entire exposition of the first movement. So I'm sure you got it, right? I mean, you understood exactly what was happening, and you heard how that lovely second subject comes around twice to be interrupted by the groan, and then it evaporates into a bunch of moans, and the rest of it, you can just go listen for yourself, because the movement has its own fascinating progression and development of materials. I mean, you may have heard like a 4-note idea in the transition between the first subject and second subject, which will become quite important in the development section. There's all kinds of stuff that makes this movement wonderfully, fabulously, completely, expressively potent all by itself. But for now, just remember the moan and the groan. And now we move on to the squiggle in the second movement. Now, the second movement is very, very interesting. It's of a type that Haydn was a master of. It's emotionally very, very ambivalent, extremely ambivalent. It's based entirely, like I said, on 5-note squiggles, but the actual rhythm is it's a 3/4, 3/8. It's in triple time. It has sort of a merry-go-round quality, a slow carousel, like Ach du lieber Augustine, 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 ach, like a German folk song almost. But it never goes where you think it's going to. Haydn establishes this very firm rhythmic foundation, which he's about to disrupt. He disrupts it with the squiggle, just like he disrupted the happy second subject of the first movement with the moan and the groan. And the groan will appear here as well. In fact, I'm going to play you the groan. I think I have it here. I have it here. Let's see, number 2. Yes, I have the groan. Just so you know what it sounds like. Here is the groan as it appears in the second movement in the exposition, because like the first movement, this is a movement in sonata form. It has two big parts, an exposition and then a development / recapitulation. So here is the groan from the second movement. It's quite disruptive, as you can imagine. And now I'm going to play you the entire exposition, as I did in the first movement, of the second movement, the Andante, and just listen to the way those little 5-note chugga chugga chung, chugga chugga chung, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, little note groups keep it out of step somehow, and the music itself veers towards minor keys and other disruptive elements, even though its basic tone seems very placid, but it's nervous. It knows something creepy is going on under the surface. So here's the entire exposition, based entirely on squiggles and interrupted by a couple really serious groans. You get it? Yes, of course you do. You see, this is not hard. This is not hard at all. Haydn is building up a panoramic view of tension, and he's doing it with very, very simple elements. People get so bent out of shape when they deal with issues of form like this, and one of the things that just amazed me about these symphonies is that it's so clear what he's trying to do. You just have to let it happen. Let it soak into you. And if you hear something that sounds like something else, it's because it is like something else. Now, the minuet. Normally minuets, it's a minuet, it's a dance, right? And minuets are usually in classical symphonies, particularly moments of lightness, of happiness, of sort of carefree, gallant, courteous, majestic, courtly, emotionally very cool. That's the point. Emotional coolness. Not this one. This one has the widest emotional range probably to date. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, the minuets are in ABA form, and the middle section, the B section, is usually called a trio. Trio having nothing to do with the word three. But this particular trio is amazing because it is essentially the minuet, only repeated in a cheerful major key with a lot of solos for the oboes, for the woodwinds, because this is a symphony written for very small forces. It's strings, a couple oboes, a couple horns, maybe a bassoon on the bottom somewhere. That's it. That's the whole shebangy. So this minuet, the basic minuet, is in the minor key, and it's creepy. It's creepy. It's based almost entirely on moans. And since I tend to do previews so far of these movements before playing you whole sections, I want you to hear the end of the minuet, which is nothing but moans. Dum ba dum dum ba dum dum. Very, very dark and sad, considering that this is supposedly an aristocratic dance. Here's the end of the main minuet section. Now I will play you the entire main minuet section, and you'll hear dun da dum. You'll notice that what we first heard in the first movement, it was in the first movement, all the way to this first movement, second subject, da da dum ba dum ba dum ba da 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 dum ba da dum ba da dum ba da dum, like that. Well, the minuet is really going to emphasize that crazily. That little motive is starting to sort of take over the symphony in a way. So here we have the whole minuet section. And now here is the trio section, the middle section, which is in a happy major key, but it uses the groan or the moan, and it does it in a way by reversing the accent, which is really, really cool. The moan is dum ba dum dum da dum. Well, this is ba dum bum ba dum. It does the other way around. The moan part, is usually the second element. Well, now it's the first. Da da dum bum ba da dum bum ba dum bum ba dum bum. That's the way it's going to go, and it even has an element of humor in it. But the humorous part, because it sounds like a hiccup, it's hicking up as it goes along. But when the minuet returns back in the minor key, oh, it's very disturbing. It's even darker. It's the same music. But after hearing this major key version, this attempted humor, to have that negated by the dark minor key version, oh my goodness, it's so effective. It really is. So here is the major key trio with its little hiccupy version of our friend the groan. Lovely, absolutely marvelous. It's genius. It's just, I listen to these things and I just think, oh, wow, how did anybody ever figure this out? I really find it absolutely amazing. So the finale, on to the finale. Now the finale has two themes, one based on the moan and the second based on the squiggle. So it's the first major part of the symphony. I mean, you found there were some groans in the second movement. Remember that? But essentially, this is where everything comes together. You have the minor key opening that turns entirely, has a major key second subject that becomes minor at the very end, as everything goes into the minor. And you have a main tune, which is based on subtle little moans. You'll hear it. You'll hear it without any problem. And then the squiggle comes back. And I'm going to play you just a tiny bit where the squiggle comes back because it's such a beautiful moment. It really is. It has a feeling of, I don't know how to describe it. It's not exactly happy, but it's hopeful. There's this sense of destiny behind it. I can't describe it any other way. Here's the passage. I mean, right here. Ya da 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 ba da dum da 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 dum ba da da dum ba ba da da dum. Something very, very similar is going to happen in the finale of Haydn's late Symphony No. 95, one of the London symphonies. There's an extension based on 5-note squiggles. That, when you listen to Symphony No. 95, you can hear the similarity. It's on a bigger scale than it is in this particular symphony. Haydn's vision has become larger, but the concept is quite similar. So I want to play you the entire exposition now, which is really quite brief because this is a finale, and it has essentially one long idea that moves from minor to major, and then in the recapitulation, we'll do the opposite. It'll go from minor to stay in minor. I mean, not quite the opposite, but sort of the thing it's going to do, to stay in the minor key. But listen to how the moans are in this quiet opening, and then how we hear this lovely, lovely extension of the theme based on the squiggle. But finally, and last but not least, the very end of the symphony, the very end, the last thing we hear, basically, is the squiggle. For the first time played loudly and violently and decidedly in the minor key. Yeah, it really nails home what this entire symphony has been doing. So I want to play you just the very ending, that last tiny passage, so you get a sense of where it's all headed. Here it is. So there we have it. Moans, groans, and squiggles. And between them, these three tiny elements, we have one of the most profound, expressively deep, fabulous symphonies that Haydn ever wrote, and presented to us in a way which is, I wouldn't say it's child's play because it's so brilliant. It's so clever. It's so wonderfully effective, but it's just so easy to take in. And that's what I love about this stuff so much, because I feel as though Haydn was writing for us, for music lovers who want to experience all of the different things that music can do and all of the different ideas that music can embody and can use as process, as tools to take four disparate movements and unify them into a single arc of expressive brilliance and pathos and words fail. The music is self-explanatory. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.